And thank you for joining us at this regular meeting of the Madera City Council. If we can have roll call, please.
Mayor Medellin,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Steve Montes,
Here.
Councilmember Cece Foley Gallegos,
Here.
Councilmember Jose Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Derek Robinson Sr.,
Present.
Councilmember Santos Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Donald Hawley, absent.
Thank you, Claudia. We have this evening to start our invocation, Pastor Mark Unger from First Baptist Church of Madera. If you'll stand with me, please.
Good evening. God bless you all. Thank you for having me. My first time here. I'll be here the next 2 Wednesdays. If you don't like me now, speak up and I won't come back. Just kidding. We thank you, Lord, that we can come to this place. We thank you that we can come to this place where I can wear a flag on my tie and we got a flag that's flying. And we got men in blue standing by, protecting, serving. And we praise you for this, Lord. We praise you for the privilege this city council has to take care of the business of the city of Madera. We live in such a time that people call evil good, good evil, substitute darkness for light, and light for darkness, bitter for sweet, and sweet for bitter. And yet on our wall we can have a sign that says, the city of Madera, in God we trust. So it is my prayer for this council and these people who have come to speak their minds today, that they would receive your words, treasure your commandments within their hearts, make their ear attentive to wisdom, incline their hearts to understanding, that they might cry for discernment and lift their voice for understanding, seeking wisdom as silver and searching for her as with hidden treasures. And remember that you said, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men generously and without reproach. And we thank you and we praise you for this opportunity, and we respect all faiths while we pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. If you'll join me in the pledge, please. Ready, salute. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have an addition to our agenda. The addition that you'll be seeing on the agenda from now on is the approval of the agenda. So I'll ask at this time if there's any additions to the agenda. Is there any council member wishing to make any changes to the agenda that's prepared? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. Moving on to public comment. The first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for the members of the public to address the council on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will be asked, but are not required, to identify themselves and state the subject of their comments. If the subject is an item on the agenda, the mayor has the option of asking the speaker to hold that comment until the item is called. Comments on items listed as a public hearing on the agenda should be held until the hearing is opened, and the council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the council does not respond to public comment at this time. I'll ask the first speaker to come forward.
Good evening, Khalid Chaudhry. I don't have to mention my address, okay. Oh yeah, by the way, on this agenda you missed grand jury report. I'm glad that you read it, Mr. Mayor. Okay, good evening, Mayor and City Council. How about grand jury report? And it's not on your website yet. Why? It was very good to see that our concerns about the City of Madera's practices under previous city managers, Steve Fraser and David Tooley, have been examined by the Madera County Grand Jury. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to them for their year-long investigation and the extensive report that sets the record straight for Maderans. I hope everyone reads in the Madera Tribune or online. We, the residents, were all right about the corruption, cronyism, the 300,000 plus senior salaries, and the high fees, water rates, plus business fees, business permit fees, they were raised too, so it missed here. were all true. Backroom deals, lack of ethics, lack of transparency, mishandling of public monies, dodging document inquiries, and even lack of cooperation with the grand jury were more shocking and more arrogant. Thankfully, changes were made after the election, and we are now on a better path. However, one change that hasn't been made is removing our mayor, Andy Medallion, and his couple of cronies here who are still here on the city council. So one is absent today. So who voted with him every time? It's time to do that now. Mayor Medallion allowed all the years of salary increases and then somehow got $25,000 in family health insurance. He signed David Tooley's employment contracts, later selected his crony, Steve Fraser, as city manager, who tried to sweep it all under the rug. Mayor Medallion profited, thought nothing of doing tens of thousands of business with the city, but in small amount to avoid the regulations. Too many Brown Act violations. By the way, I myself have been a victim here of Brown Act violations many times, rather at least 3-4 times for sure. And public tantrums and fits of anger to count. Has federal tax lien of over $96,000. He can't run his own business, won't release his taxes. How can he be trusted to be ethical or guide the city of Madera now? Mayor Medallion, this all happened on your watch. You need to resign now, or you should be removed. You are not fooling anybody after this report. You do not deserve the title or honor of being mayor after all this bad or illegal conduct. Council members, I hope you have courage to do the right thing and really make this a clean slate for Madera. So we started this struggle back in October of 2017, the second meeting of the month. I started that. I started this conversation, I hope you all remember. And as a result, we saw that, 2 new incoming city council members. So Ms. Gallegos, thank you very much. And Mr. Robinson, thank you very much for your votes for Maderans. Thank you.
Hi, Ron Montoya. I'm sorry, we don't have to identify where we live. It's a new world. We have our own fireworks here. We don't need to light a match. And it's very sad. The Madera Mueller report is released. And it's not on public website yet. Mr. Rodriguez, I was so proud of you yesterday when you said accountability, transparency. It just felt like you had about 5,000 pounds lifted off your shoulder. And this is in your hands. Yeah, they're your bosses, but you have the city's support, my support. Anytime you feel like you're bullied, like we do, who come up here and say our 2 cents and nothing ever gets done, please call me at 480-7927. It made me feel very proud to live in Madera after what you said on television yesterday. However, who's going to have the guts, the heart, the common sense to say, hey, Mr. Medallion, enough's enough, and we need to censor him. We need to, unfortunately, he needs to resign. How can we move forward when we have the same shenanigans over and over again? CFD taxes. My community pays $24,000 a month. You find out they're trickling in the general fund. Mr. Boyle's on vacation now, coincidentally. 3 weeks ago, we had a meeting until midnight, and he was very stealth about his agenda item. And one of those findings is the general public cannot identify what's on the agenda, cannot kind of process the agenda, and that's not okay. Yesterday at 5 o'clock, D. Hawley, who's not here, he sent me an email, his headline saying, get the facts straight before you target our mayor. He spelled facts, F-A-X. He needs to work on his grammar. And that's exactly another finding. Intimidation. He did that yesterday at 5 o'clock, and that's unacceptable. You guys are using these CFD taxes, our police officers and fire, as pawns. It's not going to them. You guys always say, Mr. Boyle comes in and says, oh, the CFD taxes, police and fire pay their fair share, as she looks down and writes notes okay? They're trickling down to the general fund. Shame on you guys for using police and fire as pawns. I was so proud of you, Mr. Gallegos and Mr. Garcia, about a month ago when you said, I will not approve any CFD taxes. But then 2 weeks later, valió madre, it was over. Granted, they were just already there. But you know what? Who's going to knock on their door asking for their support? Knock, 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 I'm running for re-election. After I screwed you over with CFD taxes. Those CFD taxes caused my neighbor homelessness, Mr. Mayor. And as you do the sign of the cross, it makes me want to vomit. That's the definition of hypocrisy. Let's end on a good note, okay? Friends of Madera Animal Shelter does wonders in this community. I was charging my car at Save Mart. I had a nice little Chihuahua under my car. My car's very quiet. I looked, I can hear him meowing. He had an eye popped out. I paid for that at Fresno Madera Animal Shelter. Today I find out that that animal is future companion has already found a home in Milpitas. He got out of this town, okay? And that's what you guys are doing. You guys are chasing people out of here by not having the courage to get rid of Mr. Medellin. And he did it to himself, you guys. When you make your bed, you got to sleep in it. I'm sorry. I've been up here for a year and a half. You think I want to come up here? You think I like to come up here? One of these days, I'm going to come up here and say thank you, like I did earlier. But you know what? Enough. Enough's enough. It's time to wake up. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak under public comment, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I'll move into consent calendar with this announcement that I will be reading prior to each consent calendar. Matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, a member of the public or a member of the council may request an item to be removed from the consent calendar and it will be considered separately. So I will ask at this time if there's any council member or anyone from the public wishing to pull any consent item. Seeing none, I'll call for action on the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Moving into item C1, this is the second reading and consideration of adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Madera amending Title II, Chapter 1 of the Madera Muni Code relating to the City Council voting. Claudia, am I going to call for title in this one?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Mr. Rodriguez.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Arnoldo Rodriguez, City Manager. The item before you this evening was first discussed before the City Council on June the 29th, or June the 26th, I apologize, so the date's escaping me, where staff recommended a change to the municipal code. The municipal code currently requires that the City Council take a roll call vote for any resolution or ordinance. A lot of these items, I'm not going to call them routine, but some of them happen to be routine. With that being said, every item per our code does require a roll call vote. This is somewhat of an anomaly in California. Most communities do allow for one single vote by the collective of the council on matters that the council may consider routine. However, because the municipal code currently does not allow for that, every item again does require a roll call vote. Staff is recommending that the council modify that pursuant to the ordinance that was attached as part of your staff report. If adopted this evening, the City Council still has the opportunity to take a roll call vote on any single item. This does not change the voting patterns, or does not change the need to have majority vote, supermajority vote, or quorums. Again, it simply it eliminates the need to have a roll call vote on every single item. If the council takes action this evening to approve it, it's going to go into effect in 31 days. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Any questions from council regarding this particular report? Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, I'll ask for title.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Madera, California, amending Title II, Chapter 1 of the Madera Municipal Code relating to City Council voting.
Any request to waive further reading
Mr.
from
Mayor,
council?
request or move to waive further reading and adopt item C1 as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to waive further reading and adopt item C1. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hawley, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Yes.
Mayor Medellin.
Yes.
Final vote is 6 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. Motion passes.
Thank you very much,
And
Claudia.
thank you.
Moving on to, I'm sorry?
Excuse me, Mayor, thank you. I would just recommend that for every action item, before there is a vote, that it be taken to the audience to see if there's any members of the public that wish to comment on the item.
Thank you. Moving on to item C2, this is a public hearing and consideration of a resolution confirming the assessments for the citywide landscape and lighting assessment district zones of benefit, and there are too many to name. So with that,
There's
Mr.
only
Helmuth.
80. Thank you, Mayor, council members. This is the second meeting of the Landscape Maintenance District Engineers Report, or the annual report. A little bit of an overview. The landscape and lighting assessment districts, a little bit how they come to be. They're formed through state law through what's called the Landscape and Lighting Act of 1972. They're usually formed by developers when a developer proposes a subdivision. He will typically go ahead, past practice would be that they go ahead and create a new zone, which is why you see 80 zones. In the last 10 years or so, we've been trying to go ahead and reduce the number of zones. We haven't seen a new zone in some time, but that was one of the ways that a zone might be created. When a developer comes in and does a new subdivision right now, they will annex into an existing zone. As long as we don't exceed certain criteria within the law, we can do that without creating a new zone. If we exceed the criteria, we need to do a vote of all other parcel owners within that zone. Like I say, fortunately, we've been able to avoid that for a little while. It allows the parcel owners to participate in the cost of landscaping that benefits their property. And without this tool, the ability to provide landscape areas might be diminished if all the costs were borne by the local agency. The history of the engineer's report, it is prepared on an annual basis. It incorporates past and future expenses and past and future revenue. It makes recommendations on adjustments to assessments based upon the data that is populated in the city's accounting system, which is now Munis. Summary for this year, the annual report incorporates everything that Parks has learned over the last 4 years since the city took over landscaping. It incorporates an internal review of the zone's accounting following the transition from the old accounting system to Munis. This review resulted in a number of fund balances being adjusted. Some balances went up, some balances went down, and that flowed into the proposed assessments and possible changes next year. Proposition 218s will not be occurring next year. We do anticipate them occurring next year. For next year, as I indicated, we do anticipate there being there next year. As I anticipate that staff will be in a position to commence the 218s, subject to the data coming in a timely manner. We fully anticipate that happening. We will also be pursuing a mergers zones 10 through 10I. That's also tied to the same data, because what we'll do with that one is we're going to get to understand those zones, present the changes to the various property owners, and hopefully we can bring them all to the same understanding that merging zones represents a better good for the city and for the assessments in the future. Staff will also be coordinating with the city attorney to determine if alternative management approaches may be explored. That's reducing the potential for new zones. The test on Zone 10 is one of those. Greater flexibility in managing the fund balances or the deficits. If we're able to manage those, we can reduce the fluctuations in assessments. We want to keep the assessments going up at a fairly regular basis, or a fairly regular rate. One outstanding zone proposal, that was zones 10A through 10I. That's a total of 9 zones. Right now, the assessments range from $19.05 to $30.21. If we're able to go ahead and merge those zones, as hoped, we'll actually take 9 zones down to 8. Excuse me, down to 1, a reduction of 8. The impediments, past Proposition 218 history suggests that even with the smallest increases in assessments, we might still get a rejection. So part of being successful on that is getting out and talking to the community and explaining the reasons why we would merge the zones. Zone 10, an example of why it's complicated. We show all of the zones here. There are 9 zones. They're not even necessarily contiguous to each other. We have 10B on the extreme north, and we have 10B on the extreme south. 10Z, 10C, one piece of those zones. That actually shows for that zone that is sharing the cost in several other zones, 10B, D, E, F, G, H, and I. Now that's kind of an anomaly. It's sharing in a lot of zones, but it's not sharing in all the landscaped areas. So what will happen with this is we go from varying different participations down to one ultimately. This is just a simple overlay of the two, the cumulative and the Zone 10C. Last meeting's action, Council approved the engineer's report with no requested amendments. Council also adopted the resolution of intention to levy and collect proposed annual assessments. What are we doing tonight? We're conducting a public hearing to receive public comments on the changes to assessments, the proposed changes to assessments. We can address any unresolved comments, again, if any, and adopt engineer's report as may be revised. Hopefully we'll be adopting the resolution that confirms the diagram and annual assessments as set forth in the engineer's report. Levy the assessments, authorize and direct the city engineer to file diagram assessments with the auditor of Madera County. The recommended action tonight is to adopt the engineer's report with amendments as may be directed by council. Also to adopt the resolution confirming the diagram annual assessments and the levy of the annual assessments. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Keith. Any questions of Mr. Helmuth regarding this report? That's how good your report is when there's no questions. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak on this particular item, please come forward. My only comment, Keith, you alluded to it, and actually you hit the nail on the head. In years past, the community usually makes comments after the fact. And in years past, we made a very, very strong effort to reach out to the different zones and, one, explain just what their money was being used for, things of that nature. So we went to all the different elementary schools.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I went to about 90% of them, and I don't think, except for maybe one, there was more than 2 or 3 people, and in some cases, nobody showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the rain went away and the weeds came out, that's when we got a lot of phone calls. So one, I think timing is going to be an issue when we're trying to discuss in the wintertime with people about assessments that may not be on the forefront of their mind. And two, I know now with our outreach efforts, they're a whole lot better now than what they were in the past.
Yes.
So whether it's town halls or social media blasts or all of the above, we really, really need to get input from the community and let them know what they're getting for $19 to $30 annually in that fee, in that assessment. There's still a large number of people in the community that think it's just the city's responsibility to cut trees and mow medians. And so we will do our best to continue to try to reach everybody and inform them as much as possible so that they understand completely what this assessment is about in their particular zone.
Yes, I think you're exactly right on all those. In fact, our goal is to start early on this and go ahead and work with the community to show them what they are paying for with the assessments. One of the things is sometimes your own success helps to defeat your goal. Right now, I think Parks Department is doing a great job of doing this. That becomes a question of, if you're doing a great job with doing this, why do you need more money to go ahead and do it? You're going to do it better? No, I think that's because the Parks Department they're judiciously using their resources to go ahead and do what they can on any individual zone.
Right.
So their goal is to make certain that even if there is a deficit in terms of the amount of money that they actually need to maintain a zone, they still do their best to go ahead and make certain it's not really noticed.
Right, thank you for that. Councilman Robinson has a question.
Yes, I think also, like you said, the developer, they come in and they put the landscape in. And is there a citywide ordinance whereby when the developer comes, they should add drought tolerant plant, granite rocks or pavers, to cut down on using water because, it's real,
Yes.
we have a water crisis.
I believe the more recent plans that have been coming through are more of the drought-tolerant version. For
Rid of
instance,
grass, huh?
rather than grass. As an example, when Virginia Lee Rose constructed their school, they actually installed the drought-tolerant version of landscaping within the median. And what that particular version of landscaping does is it reduces the maintenance requirements and reduces the water requirements.
Yeah, maybe we need more, like art. Consult the art council and put like statues or whatever, in the mediums, in order to cut down plants. See, make it more attractive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councilman. And just as a reminder, I want to make sure everybody hears you, so if you can get the microphone a little closer next time, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. If there's no further questions or comments, I will call for action on item C2. I asked the public already. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve item C2 as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C2. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hawley, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Gallegos.
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes.
Mayor Medellin.
Yes.
Okay, the final vote is 6 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Claudia, for that. Moving on to item C3, this is another public hearing and consideration of a resolution adopting the City of Madera budget and CIP for fiscal year 2019-2020. Ms. O'Hara.
Oh, okay.
They all look alike now.
Apologize. Good evening, Mayor and council members and members of the community. Susan O'Hara, Interim Director of Financial Services. The item before you tonight is our 2019-2020 budget for the City of Madera. Just recapping where we've been with this so far this year. On April 17th, Mr. Statler presented some recommendations for our budget process. April 4th, we had the draft CIP presented by engineering. May 29th, we did general and enterprise funds overview. June 12th, we looked at special revenue and internal service funds. And last week on the 26th, we presented the entire document for your reading pleasure. The purpose of this item is to ask for action on the resolution before you. I'm going to just go through a brief overview of the budget and the summary of our proposed budget for 1920. So as a quick overview, you probably all noticed there was quite a bit of change in how the document looked from years past. The biggest change was we went from doing it in an Excel spreadsheet to using our new software that we've been working hard to implement. We still have a ways to go, but I think we're all proud of the document that we were able to put together this year, and hopefully you enjoyed it also. Again, we're trying to get away from doing things manually because it makes things prettier and more accurate and easier to follow. We tried to maintain consistent language throughout the document so that you could follow the story that we were trying to tell. We added a new section entitled Key Budget Assumptions and Changes, trying to put forth what went into this, what our assumptions were when we compiled the data. And then moving forward, it will not be a static document. It will. We have lots of plans. We were pretty excited about some of the changes that we would like to make. and we'll have more time next year to implement some of those other changes. So some of the key changes to the accounting practices that are reflected in this budget are, although Measure K funds are general funds, we have them in a separate fund right now, and as of the June 30th, those will be separated into their own fire and PD funds so that we can better track the expenses and the fund balances for those activities. And also in Measure K funds, we're going to start putting aside money for equipment replacement. The fire engines, as Mr. Rodriguez explained last week, are over $1 million to replace. So we feel like if we put some money aside every year, it won't be such a big shock when it's time to replace a fire engine, and then that would allow us to replace them as their useful life expires. And then also to be in compliance with our budget reserve policy, we have a reserve in the general fund, and we're going to begin reserves in these Measure K funds also. We started last year with $130,000 for each fund, and we will continue that until we get to the 30% policy requirement. The other thing we attempted to do in this budget, and we'll get better at going forward, is to separate out our capital outlay costs from our operating costs, so we have a better idea of what it costs to operate the city on a day-by-day basis, as opposed to adding in the big one-time purchases that sometimes kind of tend to make the budget look skewed. Some of the other assumptions that went into this is our tax consultant's projection for next year is a 2% decrease in sales taxes, not from what we budgeted this last year, but from what we actually are projected to receive. So it's actually an increase from last year's budgeted amount, but it will be a decrease from what we project to collect this year. We don't have all that revenue in yet, but it appears it's going to be somewhere around $9 million, and I believe we budgeted 8.3. I think that's correct. 8.7, something like that. So the budgeted amount for next year is that 2% decrease is reflected in I'm sorry, we're now in this year, 2020. I've been working in is based on actuals. Most of our other revenues are projected to remain the same. Transient occupancy tax, which is our hotel tax, remains budgeted at the $800,000. La Quinta across the street did open up, but then they were closed down for a lot of last year, so there's an offset there. Property taxes will go up a little bit. We do have a tax sharing agreement with Madera County, which outlines what share of the property taxes that the city receives. And of those property taxes, they're split between the county, the city, the schools, and the special districts. Golf course revenue was based on current trends. Businesses license will be about $450,000. Cable franchise tax, electric franchise tax, and then, as we described in detail last week, the vacancies were budgeted at varying degrees of fulfillment, occupancy. I'm not sure what the right word is there. The one thing that's not reflected in the budget are any cost of living increases. We're currently in negotiations. There's no contracts that have been approved, so it would be what's the word I'm looking for? It wouldn't have been prudent to include something that may or may not happen, so we did not include that. We do have a property over at Freedom Industrial Park that is in escrow. That's not completed yet, so that's also not included in here, and if that does go through, that will be a budget amendment that comes back before council at a later date. There is an allocation for League of California City training funding for council members that we talked about. There was a question about what do we pay for out of the special events budget in parks, and the $5,000 revenue that was budgeted is a grant that we get, I want to say from PG&E that pays for our movies in the park, and then The Parks is involved in the Pomegranate Festival, so that pays for some of those activities. They do a walk to school event and other small activities like that. So that's what that budget covers. We talked about paying our PERS unfunded liability at the first of the year instead of spreading it out over 12 monthly payments, which saves us a pretty good amount of money. So we need to pay that by July 31st, which we will do. And there was some question about whether that unfunded liability was included in the budget amounts, and it is included in the current budget, and under the PERS line item in each department, that unfunded liability has been accounted for there. So it is part of this budget. It's not in addition to. The Wells Youth Center was paid off this year, so that saves us a $194,000 a year loan payment, lease payment. We've also got in here a budget for the construction of the new, well, not the construction, but we are constructing a new fire station, which we plan to staff with 7 new firefighters and the equipment and supplies that entails. So that's all in this budget. There's $100,000 for the parking lot repaving at Station 57. And we also have a plan to begin funding that apparatus replacement too. Every firefighter, I believe, requires 2 turnout outfits, and they're pretty expensive. So rather than, again, have to pay for those all up front when they, because these guys are all going to get new turnouts, and then I don't know what their useful life is, but then they're all going to need to be replaced at the same time again. So we're going to put some money aside to fund that, and again, the reserve for the fire, Measure K. And then the debt service for the construction of the fire department is included in this budget. The next agenda item that we'll talk about covers the funding for the fire station that had just come in the day that we presented this document, so it's not included in this document. So we are proposing a balanced budget where projected operational revenues will pay for projected operational expenses, and those are the day-to-day telephone, gas, salaries, office supplies, those types of items that we pay for to operate. So in the general fund, the operating revenues are 31.6, expenditures are 31.4. We have a couple of capital outlay items, which if everything goes as planned, would result in a $51,000 increase to fund balance. Overall, this is just the. I struggle with this because we have a fund called general fund, and then we have 5 funds that add up to general funds. So I struggle with when I say general fund. So this screen here is just the one general fund that pays for pretty much city hall activities and those types of things. This screen is the 5 different. Well, there's going to be 6 because we split Measure K, but those 5 funds that get grouped on our financial statements as general fund funds. So that's the difference between those 2 screens. So total revenues 37.6, expenditures 35.8. Remaining 1.7, but we also have $936,000 in capital outlay that will come out of that remainder of operating expenses. And then these are the enterprise funds. As you can see, revenues are $34.1 million, expenditures are $27.2, but we also have scheduled $8.3 million in infrastructure and capital outlay type projects. Again, overview of our debt service. There was a question on the wastewater treatment plant, the CIEDB loan versus the wastewater refunding revenue bonds. Did a little research on that, and back in 2006 when we did the large retrofit overhaul of the wastewater treatment plant and expanded that, there were $32 million worth of bonds issued, and there was a $10 million loan that was taken out for a total of $42 million in upgrades. So the CIEDB loan item on there is the balance on that $10 million loan. The wastewater refunding bonds in 2015, we refunded the bond portion of that funding in 2015 to get a better rate. That's why there's two separate, but they were all for the same project. Here's the PERS contribution rates, again, we talked about this last week, are increasing, as is the unfunded annual liability. So the question came up, how much would it cost to get out of PERS if we needed to get out of PERS? And it was quite a bit of money. I think that the top number was $275 million. It's a lot of money. And on top of that, the requirement is if we were to separate from PERS, we would have to provide a retirement plan that was equal in benefits. So it's not only the cost of getting out, it's the cost of creating a new plan. So,
Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
Just have a question on that. So if we paid it off, we wouldn't have the fund that PERS maintains for us. So we would pay that amount, and then everybody's retirement would just go away.
I believe that's how it works. So then we would have to come up with another plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Employees who have vested in the retirement plan, you can't take those
take them out,
benefits
yeah.
away.
And basically, your unfunded liability is catching up for all of the employees that have already become vested in the plan. PERS did a couple of things. They lowered their expected rate of return, and they redid their assumptions. So when they initially did that actuary, they assumed people would live to be 75, and now people are living to be 80. So then that adds another 5 years of retirement benefits for all of those people that have already have benefits. So that's where that unfunded liability came in. So our recommendation tonight is to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving our budget for 1920, including the 5-year capital improvement program. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much for that report, Susan, or reports, I should say, over the last few months, and Mr. Rodriguez. So I'll ask if any council member has any questions regarding this particular item. Anybody from the public wishing to speak on this item, please come forward. My only thoughts, Mr. Rodriguez, I've said this before, I just kind of want to reiterate it. As we're anticipating a possible reduction in sales tax, and I'm not sure where we are with property tax. In years past, we've always done a mid-year budget around January, and of course this year, for a number of reasons, that got pushed a little bit later. I would really like to see that trend, since this is a live moving document, quarterly on an update on what the trends are with sales tax, property tax, because that obviously affects where we are. And so if council was kept up to date
Absolutely.
on a short report as to those trends, not just in Madera, but the central San Joaquin Valley and the state, it kind of gives us a better idea on what to expect in the future.
Absolutely, yes. And so we can start taking a look at that. And so one of the other things that we'll start doing is that we can provide that to the council, but then we can also post it on our website. So then the community has a comfort level with and the trends. One other item worth noting: a couple of hours ago, the city did close escrow on the Trampac property. So
Great.
this was literally a
I didn't
couple
know
hours
that.
ago.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
I
so
didn't know
Susan
that
didn't
yet.
even know about it. Actually, I could probably be the only one, but like I said, it literally closed a couple of hours ago. So the positive is, but as Susan had articulated in the presentation, the budget did not take that into account because things happen. Sometimes properties are in escrow and they fall out of escrow for reasons unbeknownst to really anyone. But again, the property did close a couple of hours ago, and those funds are not included as part of this budget. The city does have an account for economic development, and that's where some of the funds were taken from to purchase the property. So once we come back before the council to talk about those funds, at that point the city council will provide staff with direction in terms of how to go about appropriating those funds, or you simply say we don't want to appropriate them at this time. So that's going to be a discussion for another day, because again, that literally happened a couple of hours ago.
Thank you for that information. I appreciate it. And again, just want to reiterate with those assumptions. There are things that we can control. I've mentioned this before, but it's the things that we can't control. And that's sometimes is the economy or a drought or things of that nature. So again, as we're kept abreast of those trends, I think it would help us make better decisions and not have to try to pack a 12-month budget into a couple of months. But I think you guys did a fantastic job picking up the baton and running with it and getting us to where we are here in early July. A balanced budget is a balanced budget. And there's not too many cities around that can say that, regardless of the amount. Being in the black and balancing our budget is something that we should all be proud of. I know I am, and the city of Madera should be as well. That's through great leadership and stewardship and being fiscally responsible. So thank you all very, very much for that. Any questions from council? And if I haven't asked before, I think I did. Anyone from the audience wishing to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to council for action.
Mr. Mayor, move to approve item C3.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C3. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hawley, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Yes.
Mayor Medellin.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, final vote is 6 yes, 0 no, 1 absent. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't go far, Susan, because item C4 is consideration of a resolution accepting proceeds from the sale of bond financing for the construction of Fire Station Number 58 and a budget amendment to the City of Madera fiscal year 2018-19.
So just as a little recap on this, back in June of 2018, council discussed obtaining a loan for the construction of the new fire station. On April 17th, council approved the sale of lease revenue bonds, so we went to work on that. And on June 4th, those bonds were offered for sale via a public offering. We received the funding for that on June 26th, as promised. The proceeds that we received for the project, $4,500,000. Bond issuance costs of $108,666 will be paid from the proceeds, but those proceeds were in excess of the 4.5 that go into the project fund. So because it came so close to the end of the year, it's going to be in fund balance, and it will need to be designated as Fire Station 58 construction, so that we can roll it into next year and use it to do that construction and encumber those funds. So there's a budget amendment to add it to last year's budget, and staff recommends council accept the resolution and the budget amendment. If there's any questions.
Thanks again, Susan. Any questions on this particular item? Anyone from the audience wishing to speak on item C4, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for action.
Go ahead, City Manager.
If I may simply add something, so just for the benefit of the council and the community, this is a 20-year loan for the construction of the fire station. The city can pay it back in 10 years without penalties, actually after 10 years without penalties. For collateral, the city put the police department and Fire Station 57 for collateral in order to obtain the loan. And the loan repayment is going to average $305,000 a year. There are a couple of years where it's a little bit lower, and there's a couple of years where it's a little bit higher. But on average, over the 20 years, if the city pays consistently, it comes out to $305,000. The terms, it's not a variable loan. However, in terms of the repayment program, because it goes into the bond kind of debt, and so it's on average, it's $305,000.
Great. With that, I motion to approve C4 as presented.
Second.
Once again, it's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C4. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hawley, absent. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes,
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia,
Aye.
Councilmember Gallegos,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
I think he's temporarily detained.
okay, absent. Mayor Medellin.
Yes.
Okay, final vote is 5 yes, 0 no, 2 absent. Motion passes.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Susan. Moving on to council reports. I will ask Councilwoman Gallegos if she has a
Nothing to
council report.
Thank you.
Councilman Garcia.
Nothing, Jackie.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
Nothing to report, Mr. Mayor.
I briefly want to report on that sale of property at Freedom Industrial Park. I think that was a great day for Madera recently as we broke ground on TranPac. This is a company that's transferring from Fresno to Madera and bringing about 35 to 40 jobs to start. 65,000 square feet of industrial growth is huge for the city of Madera. And the great thing is they really don't need that much right now, but they're very optimistic and they see how much they're going to grow. So much so that their neighbor, our current tenant, did the same thing when they came in 3 years ago. I think they started with about 40 to 50 employees. They just bought 9 more acres, and they're looking at about 125 to 150 employees now in just a short amount of time, almost triple the number of employees. So I was very proud to represent the city of Madera at this groundbreaking recently at Freedom Industrial Park. And on July 19th, we will do the same thing at Rotary Park, I believe at 10 in the morning. We're going to do a groundbreaking and a celebration of the widening of 99. Again, something a long time coming. We were talking about it before the meeting about just the congestion on 99. And so this will be from Avenue 12 going north to Avenue 17. That's a game changer, not just for traffic, but for our economy as well. City of Madera and the county as well, we have a lot of dirt on 99, a lot. There's a lot of room for growth. And I think we've just really touched the tip of the iceberg. So I'm very, very excited on where we're going over the next few years and our growth pattern. So I just wanted to share that. That's all I have. And with that, I will call for an announcement for closed session. And thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. And for closed session this evening, we have item G2, Conference with Labor Negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. Agency designated representatives Arnoldo Rodriguez, Wendy Silva, and Shay Johnson. Employee organizations, General Bargaining Unit, Madera POA, Mid-Management Employee Group, and Law Enforcement Mid-Management Group. G3, Government Code Section 54957B1, Public Employee Appointment / Employment, City Clerk. G4, Government Code Section 54957B1, Public Employee Appointment / Employment, City Attorney. And G5, Conference with Labor Negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Agency Designated Representative Arnoldo Rodriguez, and representative positions, City Clerk and City Attorney.
Thank you very much, Hilda. Thank you, everybody. Okay, Mr. Rodriguez, if you would please.
Closed session item G2, conference with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, no reportable action. Closed session item G3, Government Code Section 54957, subsections B1, public employment appointment for the city clerk position, no reportable action. Item G4, Government Code Section 54957, subsection B1, public employee appointment/employment for city attorney, no reportable action. And item G5, conference with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, agency designated representative Arnoldo Rodriguez, unrepresented position city clerk and city attorney, no reportable action. And under item G6, closed session report city attorney, no reportable action.
Thank you very much for that, and with that, meeting adjourned.